So welcome and thank you for joining us. You are in the electric vehicles in Northeast Ohio Back to the Future breakout session here. So we're really glad to have you, and thanks for joining us in this 2020 virtual summit. So I have my screen shared. I'm going to switch over into presentation mode here. Okay, great. So my name is Elizabeth Lehman. I'm an energy analyst with the City of Cleveland. As I said, you've joined the electric vehicle Back to the Future session. So just before we get started, I want to make sure to extend a big thank you to our host for this summit, the Cleveland Public Library. Just a couple housekeeping things. We ask that you remain muted throughout the session, and you can utilize the chat box to the right of your screen for questions and comments, and we'll also be posting resources throughout the presentation there, so you can keep an eye on that and interact with your fellow attendees. And then the session will be recorded, so just take note of that, and you'll be able to reference both the recording and the slides following the summit. So kicking off here, I just want to take a couple minutes and provide a brief overview of sustainable transportation here in Cleveland, as well as efforts that the city has made to further promote electric vehicles. Our session title, Electric Vehicles Back to the Future, is an homage not only to the classic film, but also to Cleveland's history with electric vehicles. The Baker Motor Vehicle Company, which is based here in Cleveland, was one of the very first electric vehicles manufacturers back in the early 1900s. And at that time, believe it or not, over 25% of the cars on the road were electric. As technology for the combustion engine improved and people started traveling farther distance, that popularity declined. But again, now as we're seeing strides being made in EV technology and a lot of focus on sustainable transportation, we really hope to continue to see EVs gain more and more prevalence on our roads. So here in the Office of Sustainability, we really like to always reference back to kind of our guiding document, our Cleveland Climate Action Plan. And this plan, which I'm sure you've heard a lot of throughout other sessions and through Jason Wood's kind of intro to the summit, this really outlines goals and objectives around a lot of different focus areas, one of which is sustainable transportation. Specifically, Objective 11 of the Climate Action Plan calls for cleaner, more efficient vehicles and includes actions to develop citywide and as well as regional strategies to expand EV fleets and charging infrastructure. Kind of separately from the Climate Action Plan, the city also has an internal greenhouse gas emission reduction plan, which we call the Sustainable Cleveland Municipal Action Plan, or the SCMAP. And this details actions that the city can take within our municipal operations in order to lead by example in climate action and to kind of do our part to achieve the citywide CAP goals. And so within the SCMAP, we have an internal set of goals, but that includes the replacement of fleet vehicles with low emission and fuel efficient vehicles. So these two plans kind of have and continue to guide steps that the city has taken, both with our internal fleet expansion as well as the support and promotion for public electric vehicles, and support for partnerships and collaborations with organizations like NOACA and Clean Fuels Ohio, who you will hear from shortly. Again, I'm just going to kind of buzz through this real quick, but there's a couple outreach events that Sustainable Cleveland and the city has participated in, really starting in 2012. We've done a couple ride and drive events, which are really just promotional information, show people what electric vehicles are all about. So we've hosted 6 of these since 2012. We've also participated in a couple different programs in collaboration with Clean Fuels Ohio. One of these it was called the Midwest Drives Loaner Program. And basically it loaned out electric vehicles to organizations to explore the use of electric vehicles within their fleet, as well as, and kind of in parallel with that, we participated in an alternative fuel fleet analysis. And again, this was a program that really just generated a lot of data that organizations can use going forward as they explore alternative fuel vehicles, including EVs. A little bit about the city's commitments towards cleaner transportation. In 2014, the Climate Mayors organization was founded, and this is, as you see there, a bipartisan peer-to-peer network of mayors working together to demonstrate leadership on climate change through meaningful actions in their communities. So this was, really a grassroots efforts to continue to push for climate action. Through that collaboration, there in 2017, LA and 30 other US cities, including Cleveland, kind of banded together to issue a request for information that would kind of aggregate and get more information around municipal demand for electric vehicles. This collaboration led to the creation of the EV Purchasing Collaborative in 2018, which leverages buying power of the climate mayor cities to reduce electric vehicle costs and provide training, best practices, resources, and analysis report. So kind of through those couple different initiatives, the city has been a part of a commitment for along with 200 other public entities to purchase more than 3,500 EVs before the end of 2021. The city has purchased now 3 electric fleet vehicles in 2019. You can see one of them. Again, this was referenced in Chief Wood's State of Sustainability that we have our fancy decals on. Back in 2018, we also installed a fleet charging station in Willard Garage. And we really hope to continue to procure more electric vehicles and charging stations through our capital funding in the coming years. And then lastly, I just kind of want to call out and recognize the airport. They've definitely been a pioneer in the movement, especially here in Cleveland. And they have, I think now 6 or so different electric vehicles or fuel efficient vehicles. And, have really been pushing to lean on this cleaner transportation among their fleet. Then there's a couple different works in progress that we just want to recognize. Some electric vehicle and EVSE planning. We have participated in a couple different meetings that we're really advocating for interdepartmental collaboration. So ensuring that whether it's planning, parking, our public works department, that all different parties are kind of in the same room, talking about and trying to further promote both internal EV growth within the city's fleet, as well as creating a friendlier infrastructure for electric vehicles across the city. We're also working on really pushing and growing our sustainable municipal building policy and ensuring that we have designated low emission or fuel efficient parking at all of our new and renovated facilities, or making sure that there's EVSE readiness in the design and construction. Lastly, I just want to, there's a couple different opportunities available at the moment through the Volkswagen diesel settlement. There's the Ohio EPA is offering a couple different grants that we're trying to pursue in partnership with NOACA in order to get some publicly accessible charging stations both at some city properties as well as elsewhere throughout the region. So that's just, again, kind of high level. I know I kind of sped through everything quickly, but what's sort of going on with electric vehicles with the city? I am now very pleased to introduce Andrew Conley as our next speaker. Andrew Conley is the Consulting Services Director with Clean Fuels Ohio. He joined Clean Fuels in 2008 and is responsible for oversight of the organization's services and programs that serve fleet stakeholders. This includes consulting services for fleet analysis and planning, securing incentive funding, infrastructure development, training, and education. He also directs Ohio Green Fleets, which is a program that evaluates, assists, and certifies fleets based on sustainability metrics. During his tenure, he has secured tens of millions of dollars of funding for the organization and has certified 105 Ohio Green Fleets. And I know, Cleveland is a partner with Clean Fuels, and just in the short time that I've kind of gotten to interact with Andrew, he has been a great resource, both to the city as well as to a lot of other organizations across the state. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all that he has to say here today. So I'm going to pass the screen share over to him, and he can get started.
Great, and thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Anand. Really appreciate the chance to participate today in the partnership we've had with Cleveland over the years. I think if anybody double clicks the screen that shows my screen, you can get it bigger if you need it. But is that showing up fine, Elizabeth?
Yes, yeah, you are.
Great. So I just wanted to briefly cover at a high level the EV market and where the projections are in terms of the market, in terms of EV adoption and charging adoption, and then a planning framework that we've been working on with a variety of stakeholders throughout the state at both the state level, the regional level, and the local level. And really also look forward to hearing from Ali and Nawaka on the regional level afterwards. So with that, just for those of you who don't know Clean Fuels Ohio, we are a statewide nonprofit solely focused on sustainable transportation and really the nexus of economic and environmental sustainability for solutions that provide that win-win double bottom line of saving money and reducing harmful pollutants, both the EPA criteria pollutants and greenhouse gases. So our mission is really fuel and technology inclusive across a wide variety of available alternative fuels, efficiency technologies, and other solutions in the market today. And happy to follow up with anyone who wants to learn more about any of that. But really here to talk through the electrification framework, and most of Clean Fuels Ohio's work around electrification is done through the Drive Electric Ohio program, which is our program focused on a comprehensive set of initiatives around electrification of transportation. One of those is that there are regional grassroots owner ambassador chapters throughout the state, and there is Drive Electric Northeast Ohio. So if you happen to own an electric vehicle and want to participate, there is a local chapter in your region that we would love to have you join. So the first element of this comprehensive initiative is those grassroots consumer education through a variety of in-person and now virtual events, and the Drive Electric Northeast Ohio chapter is one of the key locuses of that. We also engage in local, state, and federal policy making. We are very engaged with the utilities on multiple levels, as well as the Public Utilities Commission. We work extensively on fleet electrification, as well as infrastructure, charging station deployment, whether that be for fleets or the motoring public, or destinations and residential consumers. We also engage with dealers and manufacturers, and running through all of those elements is goals to ensure equity and access across a broad variety of sociographic and economic arenas. So what's the EV market doing? Long term, over the next decade, there's strong projected growth in the EV market with major original equipment manufacturers, the vehicle automakers, committing substantial investments to new lines of production in terms of batteries as well as vehicles. So over the next decade, with the commitments made by global automakers, they're expecting to bring online 700 different models worldwide by 2030, nearly 5 times the number of models currently available. A similar process is happening in the US, where we're seeing not only a large number of sedans available now, but commitments by automakers like GM here in Ohio, Lordstown Motors here in Ohio, and others, to bring a wide variety of additional models to the market, particularly scaling up from those light-duty sedans into SUVs and trucks and vans, and a wide variety of new vocational models, work truck models for fleets like the City of Cleveland. Clean Fuels Ohio is funded by the Department of Energy currently on several different pilot projects with fleets. We are working with Pitt, Ohio in the out of their Parma facility to electrify a Class 6 box truck. We're working with a variety of other fleets, DHL, Procter & Gamble, Two Men in a Truck, Bimbo Bakery, all to deploy a variety of Class 4 through 8 electric vehicles right now. So we are seeing a wide variety of vehicles coming onto the market in diversity of different applications. And we're expected to have 81 models available in Ohio by the end of 2023. So these are coming, and major investments are behind them to make this happen. Why is this happening? Most analysts agree that there will be price parity, that the electric vehicle will be roughly equivalent in price to a conventional vehicle when the cost of the battery packs hit $100 per kilowatt hour or less. So there's a lot of different projections about when this will happen. All projections agree that this should happen within this decade, some projecting it happens as soon as 2023 and some as soon as 2026. But you can see even back in 2014, electric vehicles, or in 2010, as it says on the slide, battery packs were over $1,000 per kilowatt. We're just under 200 now, and turning towards that under 100 mark when the cost will come in line with current ICE vehicles, internal combustion vehicles. So once that price parity hits, there's a variety of different models projecting what the adoption will be, but most of them agree that there'll be somewhere between 20 and 25% market adoption by the end of the decade, meaning 25% of new vehicle sales will be electric vehicles because the cost for the original purchase price will come down in line with current conventional vehicles. The ranges will increase, charging stations will be more available, and the overall cost to recharge that vehicle and operate that vehicle will be significantly lower for the average motorist. So there's strong projections of adoption by the end of the decade. So with that level of adoption, if 25% of new sales are EV by the end of the decade, how should we all be thinking about planning for the charging stations that'll be needed to support those vehicles? Here's a framework that we use, and if you look at it, there's kind of 3 tiers that I've looked at here. So there's public charging, with fast charging along arteries and corridors being only the tip of this iceberg. So something that's essential to allowing mass adoption, but something that's really only a small drop in the overall pool of charging that's needed. Right now, where we see most charging taking place, the next level being that workplace and destination. So stores, libraries, workplace parking lots, things like that. But where we see more than 80% of charging taking place now is at home base. So if you're a consumer, you're plugging in at your home or garage. If you're a fleet, you're parking where you return to base and charging there. And so that is by far the biggest tranche of that pyramid in terms of deployment. So that's just to set us up with a little thinking of how charging is currently being used. And this is based on lots of information from National Renewable Energy Lab, United States Department of Energy, and other studies and information gathering that's being done. So how are we going to plan for those different types of charging that needs to take place? Well, at Clean Fuels Ohio and lots of other organizations, we think of this kind of on a 3-tier scale. There needs to be state-level planning for those traveling, within Ohio and from Ohio elsewhere. So that state level is really that tip of the iceberg, those corridors and destinations. Then there needs to be planning on the regional level. So not just how would I get from Columbus to Cleveland, but then how am I going to charge in drive around Cleveland if I am, someone who lives there and regularly travels around the Cleveland area, greater Cleveland area. And we're going to hear a lot more from Ali from NOACA, who's talking about the very great work that NOACA has been doing in that regional approach. And then there's also more that needs to be done on the very local level of the city. So the city of Cleveland proper versus the whole region. And you can see here a picture of some planning that City of Columbus has done. But I want to talk a little bit more about each of those from the high level before turning this over to Ali to dive into the regional framework that NOACA has been working on. So at the state level, the state of Ohio, ODOT, and their Drive Ohio program performed an electric vehicle charging study. So if you look up Drive Ohio electric vehicle charging study, you can find links to this document live on the internet right now. And really the goal of this was to do some of these things listed on the left, to plan corridor charging, to identify destination targets, things like amusement parks, Hall of Fame, other destinations that people dwell at for, multiple hours. Look at opportunities for the state to make investments, facilitate connections with the investor-owned utilities and the regulatory commission, and develop some templates for the local regions to piggyback off of. And so this is all in this report. And what it really looked at, you can see going left to right here. On the left-hand side is data from early 2020, a heat map of where electric vehicles are in Ohio right now based on BMV registrations. And you can see also where then in the middle, the fast chargers currently are available and level 2 chargers. And so what the state planning framework really looked at is where the gaps that need to be filled in that intra-state corridors, really looking at state routes, US routes, and interstate highways. And so what this plan does, and you can read all the fine details in it, really lays out a framework to identify where those locations are that are gaps, and which of those locations have the current electric utility capacity, and where these charging stations need to go. So I'm not going to belabor this because there's like a 30-page set of details that you can really get into the weeds on. But this state plan also combines with some incentives that Elizabeth mentioned in her presentation. So the Ohio EPA VW program has a priority of targeting funding, all things being equal, of targeting funding to gaps in this corridor network. So beyond that, then there's obviously regional partners and regional planning that needs to be undergone for the wider region. Right here, I'm picturing the different metropolitan planning organizations and regional partners. Obviously, you see NOACA up there, but there's MORPC in Central Ohio, where I'm sitting today, OKI in the Cincinnati region, and a variety of other planning organizations throughout the state. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'll defer to Ali's expertise from NOACA to tell more about what is being done on the regional level. But then on the local level, there's also a good amount of work that needs to be done. Each of these things you can think of as almost, nesting dolls, or, pieces that build on and expand on each other. So Clean Fuels Ohio was a partner with over the last 3 years for the Smart Columbus electrification program, which did receive funding from the U.S. Department of Transportation and the private Paul G. Allen philanthropies. The U.S. DOT funding was really geared towards transportation system efficiencies, and the private Paul G. Allen Foundation funding was geared towards electrification activities, vehicle electrification activities. What they did is they charted out nodes on, you can see that framework in the middle. That's the 270 interstate loop around Columbus, and charting out where fast chargers need to be in the middle and where level 2 charging needs to be. And obviously fast chargers right now are framed as giving 50 kW and up in terms of power, whereas level 2 chargers are somewhere between 8 to 12 kilowatts per hour. But these kind of plans need to be have locations prioritized, and then policies such as the right to charge, meaning if I live in a multi-unit dwelling, an apartment complex, I have the right to, within reason and within various policy frameworks, install either a charger on my own at that location, or work with the property management to have access to charging. Same, with rental properties, things like that. Make ready building codes so that if a new high-rise is being built, new parking lots being built, new condo or apartment buildings being built, that there's some pre-plumbed spaces with electric capacity to be able to add charging stations, similar to how they have ADA compliance on parking lots that would say 10% of spaces need to be earmarked for ADA compliance. Many cities have similar policies that would say all new builds need to reserve 6% of spaces for electrification, make ready. So these kinds of plans on locations can also be paired with policy goals to really remove barriers and pave the way for the deployment of charging to support the oncoming wave of vehicle electrification. So in the Smart Columbus program, that really played out in these different categories of charging that kind of relate to that pyramid we saw at the beginning of my presentation, where they really worked with a number of different larger multi-unit dwellings to deploy 88 level 2 ports. Then around those different pieces that we saw, public access level 2 and DC fast charging. A range of those locations were, you can see 150 level 2 ports, 38 DC fast charging. Workplace, again, these are the places where people park for 8 hours a day when the world's in normal configuration, and so lots of ports deployed in those locations. And then working with fleets like the City of Columbus and a number of municipal partners, as well as Ohio State, the county, Ohio Health, and others to deploy fleet charging at their locations. So a lot was done to implement this here, and there's a whole playbook and lessons learned and available resources for folks to follow up on. So all of that pairs with some incentives. That framework pairs with incentives that are available. The EPA just closed their incentives for level 2 charging, and they will have incentives, grants for DC fast charging coming up available in February. So now's the time to start planning for those. And then multiple of our utilities have rate cases pending. Right now, AEP, Duke, and DP&L all have rate cases pending, and First Energy, I know, is working on one. Those rate cases would be to get approval to make utility-based investments in electrification in charging stations throughout their service territories. So with that, Clean Fuels Ohio just finished hosting a whole virtual conference similar to this one, and you can get all the information on our website there. There were 10 sessions dedicated to electric vehicles with information from the utilities, from from a workplace charging, residential charging, DC fast charging on corridor. There's a whole number of resources available. It's totally free. You just need to register, and you can view all the recorded sessions. So with that, I'm going to yield back to Elizabeth on the program here.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was a ton of really great information. And I just want to make a note, we are capturing questions. Some of them we are responding to, some of them we're going to save to the Q&A at the end, and some of them will probably follow up with responses. And now I'm going to share my screen again here. Okay, great. So our second panelist is Ali Makarashi. Ali is the Director of Transportation Planning and Engineering at the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency, more commonly known as NOACA. where he leads a team of planners, engineers, and modelers. Dr. Makarachi spent considerable time as a transportation consultant, both in the US and the Middle East, and has worked as a transportation planner in the public sector. Ali holds 2 master's degrees in mathematics and operations research management and a PhD in transportation planning from the University of Birmingham in the UK. Certified civil engineer in both Arizona and Michigan. Dr. Makarachi developed several travel demand and traffic simulation models at the macro, meso, and micro levels and has expertise in modeling toll roads, infrastructure, financial planning, and street impact fee plans. He is definitely a wealth of knowledge. He's going to be talking a little bit about NOACA's kind of regional study for EVSE locations. I am going to switch over. Okay, Ali, and you can just let me know when to advance.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Andrew, for the information, and Anand. So I start from the, we started this project about 2 years ago, and are we, okay. What you see on the screen now is the approach we took about 2 years ago to get basically the question was where we put the charging ports and what's happening in the next 10 years from now to 2030. So this is what you see in the screen is basically the approach we took. First, we read basically literature review and we look at the other articles, other people, what they do, and other organization, and then that basically what's happening in the country, in the different states. Then we have got the NOACA travel forecasting model. We utilize that to see where the people are going and where's the destinations and where's the origin and all this. Then we developed the distribution model for the electric charging ports, and then we proposed some charging garages and then estimated the annual required budget for this from now for 2030. Next, please. Okay, what Andrew mentioned, and we know that there are 3 types of the charging level or charging location. One is a home, which is a AC level 1. Level 2 is at work and public parking garages. And there's a fast charging, which is usually the public parking garages and lot. And then the next slide, please. Okay, what you see here is we talked about prices are coming down and the battery is getting cheaper, and this is just gives you the calendar 2000, I think this is 2017 something, the prices of the electric cars. And I just want to add, if you last line, it talks about on the slide says car maker worldwide will spend more than 135 billion for the electric chargers up to the 2030. That's something is, that's investment people are putting in it and for electric chargers. Next, please. So when we talk about level 1 at home, usually what we say, if you charge for 1 hour, you can drive for 4 to 6 miles. And if you say level 2 for 1 hour, about 10 to basically 60 miles. And when we talk about DC fast charging, we are talking about 20 minutes. You go up to 90 miles with that charge. And the range we are talking about right now, but I'm sure the tech is going to improve and this is going to get much better. Next, please. So as I said, we studied lots of reports and lots of forecasts and the documents and what basically the energy department says, and we read all this and see what's happening, what's the future in terms of electric cars. So that's a small list of what we read. Next, please. You saw this slide, and what happened is some people are overestimating, some people are basically lower estimating what's happening in the future. So we decided for our study and for our region to take the middle ground, what I've shown in the black line. is a kind of what's happening in the middle ground, and we took that one as one of the forecasts for the future. And the study and what we did is based on that middle ground, not overestimating, not lower estimate. Next, please. And Andrew talks about the future, and just I want to highlight this in 2020 based on all this, as I said, all the studies, we are talking about 18.7 million EVs, which is a 7% of the 259 million vehicles in the country. So what happens is but the interesting point is that 20% from basically in the 2030, 20% is going to be annual vehicle. That's starting very slow, but it's going to go much faster by 2020 and in the future. So for these, again, they are talking about how many charging ports we need to support 18.7 million, and that's about 9.6 million we need charging ports. And if you put them something like four or five of them in one location, like a gas station, we need so many of them in the next 10 years. Next, please. 9.6 million charging ports based on these forecasts, divided in a 1% fast charging, 8% is in a level 2, is about 800,000 ports, and 13% workplace, 1.2 million, and about 7.5 million at home. These are what the forecast is going to cover, this 9.6 million of the charging. Next, please. So then we look at see what happens in terms of the 2017 data and in the country. And this is one of the maps I found, and this is from the Energy Department. And when you look at the Ohio, is a 0.83 is per 1,000 people basically registered electric cars. So the one extreme is like California is about 8.64, and they are lower about 0.2, 0.4. So it's a different from not basically maybe very small 1 or 2.2 up to 8 cars per 1,000 people. Next, please. So I'm not going to go through this. This is just so many, but right now, based on 2015-16, Cleveland is a 400 registered electric cars. In the NOACA region is about 1,600. And what's happening right now, again, is the average. I'm not exactly, but the average price we pay is about 10 to 13.4 cents per kilowatt hour electricity in 2017. And if you take 15,000 VMT vehicle mile traveled in a year, so if you drive 15,000 miles every year with your car, the charges for the electric cars are $540, which is a 3.6 cents per mile. Compared with what you are paying now, conventional is about 1/3 or 1/4 of the price. We are, with some assumptions, that's what electric is going to cost right now. Next, please. Based on what I just said, we estimated how many is going to be in our region, because we are planning organization for the NOACA region, 5 county, and said, okay, what's happening now and how are you going to grow? So based on that and looking at the different forecasts, we talk about 28,000 in 2030 cars in our region. Next slide, please. That's basically, as I said, it's a middle ground, not overestimating, not low estimate, is a middle ground of we are talking about 28,800 cars is going to be, electric cars is going to be in the NOACA region by 2030. Next, please. So for this number of cars, we said, okay, how many basically charging ports we need? So we came back with something like home level is about 12,000, and level 2 means public or workplace, both of them related to work. So you drive the car to the work, and then you put the charge on and you go to your work for 8 hours and come back, pick up your car. That's about 2,100. And your public fast charging is about 120. That's our purpose, and that's what we estimated we need for the supporting all those cars. Next, please. So again, car charging we talked about in the Noaka region. So as I mentioned, there are some low estimate, high estimate, and what we just mentioned, 12,000 and 2,100 and 120. Again, to support what I said, is the middle ground. We are not overestimating. We are not, we are just taking the middle ground and see. Hopefully, that's most likely in terms of the probability and mathematical models, this is going to happen, and that's what we need for the supporting our electric cars. Next, please. So in this, again, we did some sensitivity analysis because we want to support, when we ask for this kind of investment in our region, we need to support this with some good data. We did some sensitivity analysis, and so we went through the number of charging ports per each electric car. So whether there's a 0.4, 0.5, when I say 0.5 means for each 2 cars, one electric charging port. So that's the 0.5 is the ratio of that. So we look at this, and again, it came back with the same middle ground for 28,000. We need something like 14 something thousand, the L2 and L2 charging ports we need. Next, please. So what do we have now? In our region? These are the location. You see the red dots are showing the locations of usually there are 1 or 2 electric cars, and it's not, car showroom, and they have got, when they buy the car from them, they say that you can bring your car back and we charge for you, but it's a limited. So we need to expand that, and we need to go. Next slide, please. We need to go to something like this. So 1 floor, 1 level of the garage, parking garages, and we have a electrical, basically connected to the computer. So when the computer will decide when they charge, for example, the red car finishes, he switches to other one, your car there, and you go to work and come back, and your car is charged, and that's all done by the computers and by the, not you don't have to worry about it. These are the typical what we see. So based on this, next slide, please. We said, okay, if you are talking about L2, when I say L2, I remind you that we're talking about workplace charging. And then we look at our model, the travel demand model, Noaka travel demand model, and see where the people work and what's the most people go during the day and work. And you can see the map is kind of heat map. It shows you the red downtown is more people come here. There's a yellow, red up to. So these are the basically most likely. I mean, these are people, people work and resident in this 5-county work, and you can see there's a different color, and then we identify from there basically where the major or employment centers. The next slide, please. The next slide shows you where I wouldn't say major, but most employments are. They are the locations, and that's the places people can go, and most likely they can use the electric car, and they can go there and charge their cars, and they can come back in the afternoon, pick up the cars. Okay, next, please. Again, we need to have it optimize basically the locations. We need to be in a right location for the people when they are more likely they're going to come and have an electric car and park it there and charge it. So for that, we look at the 3 different scenarios. One is based on the trip destinations. The other one is a employment center prioritization, and then the hybrid, a mix of these 2 together and combine it together. I don't go to the lunchtime to go through the mathematics, which I love it, but I don't think so. You will be very amused with listening to all these numbers, but we use the employment, population, work trip, destination, road network, all these, and then we basically, for each one to prioritize and identify the locations. Next, please. I try not to show, but I didn't want to. I love the maths and numbers, so I wanted just to show anyway the equation and everything we have used. Let's go quickly past this because if we stay there, I'm might start talking about them, and I enjoy it, so we might run out of the time. So next, please. So for each approach, we come up with the numbers for each of these workplaces or employment centers. And you can see probably it's a bit tiny, but you can see some of them, like downtown is a 343, 6,800. So we came up with one approach, the first approach. Then second one, we said, okay, what's if we take the other second one, employment prioritized location? So that's another numbers we came up. So these are the number of charging ports we said we require in this employment center. The third one is a hybrid. Then as we take all the approaches, middle ground, we put them together, we averaged them and said, okay, that's the numbers for the employment area. And these are the numbers average of all these three approaches. And for example, the first one, next slide, please. Sorry, I'm a bit faster than. Next slide, please. Okay, that was I was talking about, we took the average. And on this slide, you can see, for example, airport 92, then downtown is about 357. And then we go to simple Solon is a 91. These are what we estimated required charging ports. Next, please. Okay, that's the numbers on the map. And we basically use the different color. You can see downtown again is a red, there's a blue, there's a green. So with a legend there, you can see the blue is the lowest and it goes to green is the highest numbers. So these are the distributed, the charging ports in the region to cover the 5 counties. And okay, next, please. Then we came back and we said, okay, based on the annual and how much this to get to 2100 by 2030, how much do we need per year? So you're starting from 50, 60, and it goes to gradually as the electric cars are getting more, people are buying more, using more, the line becomes sharper and basically steeper, and it goes to, for example, that 2029, we're talking about 292 charging ports we need to support those. So next slide, please. Again, if you like the numbers, these are based on each employment area and each year, how much we think we need to support the electric cars. And you can see for each numbers I showed you earlier on, now we have got for each year, for example, for airport 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11. For downtown, we started higher, 10, 15, 20. So those are numbers we need to basically. Next, please. Okay, after this, we came back to as I said in the beginning, first slide, we talk about the charging and how much it costs. And then we looked at, again, sources and see how much it costs. So level 1 is about 300 to 1,500, and installation is up to 3,000. Level 2 from 400 to 6,500, and up to 12,000 for the installation. And when we talk about fast charging, we talk about 10,000 to 40,000, the unit cost, and the installation is about up to 50,000 to install one of these fast charging in a certain location. So next, please. So that charging gave us basically the required budget for every year, and that's starting again from less than 1,600,000, it goes up to something like 4 million and 5 up to 5 million. So that's the required budget to support and to install all these forecasted and required EV charging ports. Next, please. So this summarizes what we said is a 28,800 electric cars by 2030 in our region, NOACA region. We need 2,100 electric charging ports, and that cost, accumulated total cost from this period of 10 years, 27.8 million are estimates. Next slide, please. So next step is a fast charging. Again, we look at the fast charging in terms of the trip distribution and bidirectional traffic volume at interchanges. That's important because we look at the all trips, and you can see here, but again, we created a heat map. Next slide, please. So on the left-hand side is a heat map, shows all trip by destinations, and on the right-hand side, basically the volume on the freeway. And so based on this looking, because mainly the previous discussion was about workplace, this is about the fast charging. So we need quick charge so people can go stop there 20 minutes and have something to eat, then come back and take the car and carry on their journey. So based on that, we use this. Next slide, please. Again, we use some mathematical model to come up with the locations. Next, please. That's the same thing I mentioned, is all vehicles. And the next, please. So we came back here, we are talking about interchanges, we are talking about arterials, we are talking about the freeways. So that's the places we need to. So again, we identify those and we basically optimal numbers. Next, please. So based on that, we said, okay, for DCFC stations, we are talking about 120, 50 by 2020 starting, then 2025, 70 altogether. We are talking about again, the total cost is going to be about $7 million for this by 2020 to get these charges. The next slide, please. I am putting all this together, and the government locations and the DCFC charges, L2 charges, and together. So these shows how we are seeing the 2030 is going to be, but part of the NOACA's long-range plan, we are looking at more than looking at the 2050, but to keep the to 2030, this shows the map we are proposing, and actually we have started. One more slide, please. Next one. It shows you regarding the fast charging, and that's the 5 miles is a coverage basically. So like now, when you look at the gas station, whenever you stop, you look around and within a few miles, you find a gas station to get the gas and carry on your journey. Here, the same thing. That's for 2030, we look at for these blue dots, which is a fast charging ports. You can get there and get the charge quickly, but we are looking at this as a long range, as I mentioned, to cover whole area. So whole area is going to be covered by the electric fast charging. So everybody, anywhere they can drive for about 4 or 5 miles to get to this and get the charges. Next, please. And that's what we have done. And I'm sorry I was going quickly because I wanted to meet the time, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ali. That was a great overview of all of the work. And NOACA, I know that I've kind of sat through this a couple times, and I feel like every time that I hear about the work that NOACA has done, I learn a little bit more. So I am to kind of transfer control over to Anand Natarajan, who is the energy manager for the city of Cleveland. He's going to be moderating with the last, we'll probably go a little bit over the next 10 or 15 minutes. We'll be doing question and answer. I know that we've been kind of collecting some that have come through the chat window, but we also, want to kind of frame the questions in a couple different time frames. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to pass it over to Anand.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So that was great, Ali and Andrew, for the, that was really very informative. There's certainly a lot of information, and I know we could have just done, as Andrew does, like a whole session, days of conference on EV, right? So if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. So yes, okay. So and we've been answering a lot of the questions through the chat, and certainly it's been a pleasure to review these questions. We will try to frame them. We'll try to ask some questions from the framing perspective, and then also be able to address them. Either if we don't do it now, we will certainly follow up with our speakers to offline, because we plan to share recordings. So if that works, I think we've tried to address many questions through the chat already. So I'm going to try to ask some questions to the panelists, and also have some similar questions also to the audience to weigh into if needed. So we're trying to understand, right, from a 1 year, 5 year, 10 year perspective, we had a lot of different information, right? What can entities do, and who needs to do what? I mean, for the first year, right? For instance, if you want to adopt some of this, and I know we heard some of the questions being addressed, but just from a 1 year perspective, for instance, funding, just to get something started, right? I mean, how do we get that going? And I would also want to say that I think we might go a few. We do have time until we want to go until 2:10. 2:05 to 10, so we have about 10 to 15 minutes. I don't want to cut the QA too short, so thank you.
Yo, I can chime in real quick if you want, Anand.
Yes, go ahead, Andrew. So go ahead.
If you are a fleet or a site owner, you own a restaurant, business, any of these locations, now's the time to start planning. Do you want charging at your location, and do you want that level 2 or DC fast? There are incentives that just closed for level 2 funding through the state, but there are incentives coming up for DC fast charging. Take a little more planning to develop, but if you are looking at DC fast charging, funds will be available starting in February, with likely an end of March or April deadline next year. And so there's a good ramp to start planning for that now.
Great. Ali, do you have anything to add as for the first year in terms of planning? What can interested parties do? More so from a public and also workplace perspective.
Well, I just showed you, the slide I just showed you. We have got a plan for the first year. How many we are going to put there? 50, 60, and we are going every 10 years up to 2030.
Okay, right. And so also just to try to understand, right, I mean, what type of coordination would we have to do with the local electric utilities or the investor-owned electric utilities in order to continue to do this, right? Both adopting, determining sites, labor, inflation, there's a lot of work going on, right? So how do people start working on that? And there are different stakeholders involved.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Ali.
NOACA is basically planning regional, basically for just our region. So we make coordination between our communities and the counties and all this. We get together. Usually, this is not strange for us. We always work the cities, City of Lebanon. We just put them together and work together, like for some charging or deputy. We did the same thing, and we coordinate always.
Great. So Andrew, if you want to provide your inputs about how, what do we need to do in terms of working with the electric utilities? Obviously, they are involved. They have stake in this, right?
Yeah. So if you are looking to be a site host, there's a couple things you can do. First, you'll want to assess the electric service to your facility. So the utility will be able to tell you, hey, you need three-phase 480 power if you're going to do a fast charger, and you have that or you don't have that. And if you don't have that, they have ability to upgrade your service. It will cost you something, usually in the order of $2,000 to $5,000 if they need to drop in a new utility pole and transformers for your location. That's if they have lines in the region. If you're in a remote or rural region or a downtown location with an underground utility network, those costs can jump quite a bit. But generally, it's not too much to upgrade. So the utility can tell you have the service or need it upgraded, and then your building facility staff or an electrical contractor can tell you the electrical panel at your building where the connection comes in and hooks up. Do you have enough capacity to put the level of charging on that additional panel, or do you need to make facility upgrades to your electric room at that site? Those are the two big things to start, and
okay,
you can do that now.
That makes a lot of sense. Ali, if you have, I think from a planning perspective, it seems like obviously that we have to go work lockstep with the electrical utilities and our host if you have any electrical panel. In some cases, right, I'm assuming we may not need any upgrades like you pointed out, hopefully, right? And in other cases we may. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
The level 2 charging that Ali went over, those are 208 to 240 volt units. They're basically like an electric washer and dryer, so they're not a crazy amount of new service. So you can think about those like that. The DC fast chargers are substantially more power and would likely require both facilities and potentially utility services.
Great. So in terms of fees, right, this has come up quite a bit. How to determine what to charge users, right? I mean, so there are various models, but I'm wondering if you can provide maybe a rundown of some of the very some models. And again, we're focusing more on the public charging. We're not talking about residential or fleet here. It's more about public charging when I want to go and charge in the garage. What do I do? So,
so in terms of fees, two high-level things. First, the Ohio Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures has a signage requirement. So all public charging stations must have a sign posted that says what the fees are and what they're paying. So that's part of the weights and measures rules. Now, you don't have to charge a fee, so you could make it an amenity, and there are a number of Whole Foods or places like this that are offering it as a free amenity. But if you do want to assess a fee, the main structures are either time-based fee, it's going to cost $1 an hour to park here and charge, or now this summer the Public Utilities Commission clarified through a memo that site EV charging station owners are allowed to assess cost per kilowatt hour. So Ali mentioned, there's anywhere from 4 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour is what most regional customers are being charged. Hey, I'm getting first energy rate 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Most of these chargers have the ability to be networked and to then just plug in, hey, I want the cost to be 10 cents per kilowatt hour, so that each kilowatt that individual receives through the charger is, paid for by the individual charging. Then you'd be able to also calculate like, hey, we also have to pay $1,000 a year to maintain this site, and therefore we think, this many cars will charge over that time, so we can divide it out and say we need to add an extra 1.5 cents per kilowatt to amortize out that maintenance cost. So there's a variety of models like that, and you can even hybrid the two and have cost $1 to activate and then 10 cents a kilowatt after that, or something like that also.
Great. I think that's a great point. So we have different models out there. I want to switch over to a 5-year time frame, and maybe Ali, if you can still hear us. So do you, have you, has NUACA done, or do you think anything about the workforce development perspective? Or if not, Ali, if you're not familiar, then certainly Andrew, you can weigh in. What do you think is the workforce development supply chain look like, right? Because obviously it's a lot of it is about jobs, clean jobs, right? So if you can talk a little bit about that and what's happening currently with the GM, for instance, a plan. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, we did work based, as I mentioned, we did work on the, how the employment is going to change, and what I showed you as the employment center, that was the location for based on our near future and 2030, basically looking at the jobs are this going to create. But these are all in our model, very long, basically 2040, 2050, or very short. So we consider all these numbers and peoples and the changes and all this in our model, and that was the.
That's great. So I think that kind of addresses where people are working and how many people will be working. What we're also interested in finding out, right, we always are trying to project Cleveland and Ohio as a manufacturing hub, and Ohio especially, right, regaining ground in terms of manufacturing electric vehicles. So trying to understand how important is this to the regional economy. Andrew, if you want to take that.
Yeah, it certainly is important to the regional and state economy. Ohio's, one of the top supply chains for automotive manufacturing, and certainly there's a variety of stakeholders very interested in pursuing advanced manufacturing from some of the stakeholders currently working, the university network and their engineering and business development programs, Ohio. There's lots of different entities working on some advanced manufacturing policies and plans around this.
Okay. All right. I think so that, in terms of just, retooling the workforce, right? Seems like there is a lot of focus on that, right? I mean, do you think, it seems like there's also renders itself to an industry that, we heard the Lordstown Motors, right, opening up a plant recently here in Lordstown Motors, taking up an old GM plant. Do you see that kind of activity, either of you could take this? And so in kind of going lockstep, or are we just going to buy and procure from out of state, right? I think that's what we're trying to understand as again. Then have we lost out? Are we positioned enough to be able to gain on opportunities of manufacturing EVs and batteries, based on what you understand?
I think the short answer is Ohio's fairly well positioned. We see Lordstown Motors, we see the GM battery plant and the new Voltage Valley investments in that region. And then with our strong position in auto manufacturing overall, I think we are well positioned, but it does take leadership from the state, regional, and local level to put in the right policies. And something that was being discussed in the chat is, the current EV registration fee to pay fair share of road tax is something that, Clean Fuels Ohio supports there being some registration fee for EV. As pointed out by, I believe, Michael Peters in the chat, the current registration fee is actually prohibitive and is way more than a vehicle would normally pay in gas tax. So things like that and other policies need to be eliminated or revised so that we're not putting up obstacles to the sale of these vehicles in the state at the same time we're trying to produce more in the state.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So yeah, and certainly we would not for fleet, right? There are different models, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to try to change policy to be able to be more conducive, right? To purchasing electric vehicles. And as an owner, I can attest to that. When I got the $200 fee, the registration fee, it was a sticker shock. So hopefully that doesn't, right? So also, I think we're looking for, and Ali, we want to thank you for that longer term projection, right? Have you done any kind of grid capacity type projection for more DCFC, the fast charging coming on board? Do you know if that's going to have an impact? I know there are a lot more questions around that, right, in terms of demand. And have you done any projections on that model? Or if not, what would you recommend anybody doing to understand if there's enough electrical capacity?
Well, we haven't done much on this, but I can just give you this example. If somebody had told you 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the cell phone is going to change like this so fast, you wouldn't believe it. You would have said, no, that's the James Bond movies. That's not actually happens now. Any of us has got a cell phone and they connect to the email, they connect to the computers. It's like a small computer in our hand. So the same thing is happening here, although we haven't, but once the electric cars gets more, there are lots of people are going to do research, invest, and in terms of the electric grid, it's going to be much faster. We think it's going to it will be available and people are going to use it so quickly once the prices are coming down. All this is going to happen. And I've seen, as I said, the cell phone is one example of how quickly it's going to happen. And I know we started from 50, 60 charging ports, but we're going to go there and the electrics to grid to support is going to be there. So I am very optimistic for the future of these electric cars.
Yeah, and there is a session from the Midwest Green Transportation Forum that I talked about, our virtual conference, where we had AEP, Duke, a municipal utility, and a co-op utility talking about this issue specifically. So, the bottom line for them is they weren't concerned about capacity, but what they were concerned about was demand management. If you have a cluster of fast chargers and a big glut of demand, then that's a problem. So they need to, that's where coordination with the utility makes everything smoother. They know what the throughput is and what the demand is, but there is real interesting ways for demand management with EVs overall. A lot of EVs plugged in at home or at a work base, like a fleet vehicle can charge overnight. So some of that demand can be shifted to off-peak hours in ways that can actually help the grid. Longer term, there are technologies for vehicle-to-grid exchanges. So some of that power can be more quickly passed back and forth where needed. So long term, there's some interesting irons in the fire for development.
I think you're muted still, Anand.
I think we've had quite a few good questions also during the chat, and we'll make sure that we collate them and provide more inputs as we provide with the recording too. And certainly would look to Andrew and Ali to help with that. So this has been very useful, and thank you all for the audience too for the providing in interactive responses. It's really helpful to have people in the audience also knowledgeable about this. So we want to thank you again, and I'll hand it over to Livy to provide the closing comments.
So just to wrap it up, thanks for sticking around for a couple minutes. I know over the scheduled time, but hopefully you are able to take away some information from some experts here. Again, I want to just thank one more time, thank the Cleveland Public Library for hosting us for our summit. Our contact information is here on the screen if there's any other follow-ups you want. Again, we will also be distributing recordings and slides and questions and everything, so keep an eye out for that. I know there's a couple really great sessions here wrapping up our summit, starting probably any minute now, so I'll hope that you can enjoy those, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.